In China, the mountains are not where human ingenuity comes to a stop. They are where some of the boldest engineering projects ever attempted begin. A bridge spans a canyon so deep that the ground nearly disappears from view. A hotel is built into the bottom of an entire quarry. Or a system powerful enough to lift an entire ship over the height of a massive dam. What makes these structures extraordinary is not just their size, but where they were built. They make people wonder how the machinery, the materials, and the workers were ever brought into terrain that seems impossible to reach. These are the projects that forced engineers around the world to rethink what it means to build in the mountains. Huajiang Grand Canyon Bridge. The Huajiang Grand Canyon Bridge makes the very idea of bridging a river seem far too small. Here, the structure spans a gorge more than 600 meters deep, making it the highest bridge in the world. Two bridge towers rise from steep mountainsides, supporting the entire bridge deck with a network of steel cables stretched across open air, often fading in and out of the mist. The greatest challenge was not spanning the gorge itself, but transporting thousands of tons of equipment and massive steel girders to a site where there was virtually no construction platform. Each steel segment was suspended in mid-air and joined together with a margin of error of only a few millimeters, transforming the void that once separated the two cliff faces into a complete transportation route. The day the bridge welcomed its first vehicles was also the day two sides, separated for thousands of years, were finally connected by a single bridge. Gupatan Ship Lift. The Gupatan ship lift operates like a giant elevator, lifting an entire ship over the height of the dam in a single operation. Instead of passing through multiple navigation locks, the vessel enters a lifting chamber more than 120 meters long, holding tens of thousands of tons of water at the same time. The greatest challenge is not lifting that enormous weight, but keeping the entire system in perfect balance while synchronizing the massive steel gates and locking mechanisms so the water levels on both sides remain undisturbed. As a result, the shipping route along the Wujiang River is no longer divided by the dam, allowing cargo vessels to save a significant amount of travel time. When the final gate opens, the ship quietly leaves the lifting chamber and continues its journey along the same river, even though just a few minutes earlier it was floating at a completely different water level. Longtai Grand Bridge, the first thing you notice on the Longtan Grand Bridge is not the bridge itself, but the moment the ground beneath your wheels suddenly disappears. At the bottom of the canyon, there simply is not enough space to anchor the massive support columns used in conventional bridge construction. Instead, the engineers chose a concrete arch design with a long main span, allowing the entire crossing to be supported only by the mountain sides at either end. Every load of concrete, every piece of equipment, and every machine had to be transported onto steep rocky slopes before being assembled hundreds of meters above the canyon floor. When the final arch segment was locked into place, the gap that had once divided the entire canyon was finally connected without a single additional support rising from below. That is what makes the Longtan Grand Bridge one of the most impressive examples of how structural engineering can redefine the limits of the landscape. Huge bridge. Driving across the Duge Bridge, you can almost forget that you are crossing what was once the highest bridge in the world. Only when you look over the railing does a canyon more than half a kilometer deep suddenly appear between the sheer cliff walls. To build the bridge towers on mountain sides with virtually no construction platform, engineers first transported equipment to the mountaintops and stretched the first cables across the canyon before assembling the bridge deck high above the void. Today, the bridge connects two mountain peaks once separated by the Beipan Canyon, replacing a journey that once required descending to the valley floor and climbing back up with a direct crossing through the sky. Standing on the bridge, the experience feels completely different. The roadway is so smooth and steady that it is hard to believe one of the deepest canyons in southwestern China lies directly beneath your wheels. Guanxing Highway. On the Guanxing Highway, the road constantly disappears into the mountains before suddenly reappearing on bridges that soar across deep canyons. Over a distance of more than 160 kilometers, drivers cross 88 bridges and pass through 11 tunnels, making the journey feel as though it never leaves Guizhou's karst landscape. The highway was designed to weave between bridges and tunnels, following the natural contours of the mountains and valleys instead of forcing a straight route through them. Along this very highway, the Beipan River Bridge once held the title of the highest bridge in the world when it was completed. Each time daylight appears at the end of a tunnel, another bridge unfolds ahead, making the entire journey feel like a continuous transition between two worlds, inside the mountains and high above the open air. Great Wall of China. The Great Wall of China does not cross the mountains. Instead, it makes the landscape itself part of the defensive system. The wall follows mountain ridges, adapts to the slope of each rocky hillside, and appears only where nature alone is not enough to form a barrier. On the highest peaks, watchtowers were positioned to extend visibility, relay signals, and control the mountain passes. To build each section of the wall, every stone, brick, and construction material had to be carried uphill by people and animals before being assembled over generations. By taking advantage of elevation, cliffs, and natural mountain passes, the structure never needed to create one continuous, straight defensive line. Instead, it transformed an entire mountain range into a network of observation, warning, and defense stretching for thousands of kilometers. Lingshan Mountain Cliffside Escalator. The Lingshan Mountain Cliffside Escalator turns a sheer cliff into a walking journey through a series of escalators that cling to the mountain's side. Its steel support system is anchored directly into the rock face, carrying visitors up hundreds of meters of elevation in successive stages. As you climb higher, the scenery constantly changes from the forest canopy below to seas of clouds at eye level, with every section of escalator revealing a completely different view. Despite steep terrain, heavy rainfall, and dense fog that blankets the mountain for much of the year, the entire system continues to operate reliably, carrying a steady stream of visitors to the summit. At Lingshan, the mountain is no longer conquered by endless stone steps, but by a continuous ribbon of moving escalators that hug the cliff from the base almost all the way to the top. Fast telescope. Amid thousands of limestone mountains in Guizhou, an entire valley has been transformed into the world's largest radio telescope. It is the FAST telescope. Engineers took advantage of a natural karst depression to install a 500-meter reflector, nearly the size of 30 soccer fields, instead of constructing an enormous artificial foundation. More than 4,000 reflector panels form a surface that can continuously change shape with precision measured in millimeters, allowing FAST to lock onto targets across the vast sky. As a result, faint radio signals that have traveled millions or even billions of light years can be detected here. Among mountains once known only for rock and forests, an entire valley now serves a different purpose, quietly facing the sky to listen for the oldest signals in the universe. Intercontinental Shanghai Wonderland. Most buildings rise upward from the ground. The Intercontinental Shanghai Wonderland takes the opposite approach, with most of the structure descending into the bottom of a quarry nearly 90 meters deep. Few would have imagined this place becoming one of the world's most luxurious hotels. Engineers preserved the original quarry and turned its towering rock walls into the structural foundation of the entire hotel. The building clings to the quarry wall with only a few floors above ground, while most of its interior extends deep below the rim. The two lowest floors are even built beneath the water, requiring the entire structure to adapt to complex geology and the surrounding vertical rock walls. When night falls and the windows begin to glow, the entire cliff seems to light up from within, where there was once nothing but rock, dust, and the sound of mining machinery. Chongqing Wulong Shuangbao Grand Bridge. In the Wulong Mountains, the karst landscape is divided by deep gorges and towering cliffs, making the construction of a mountain highway an extraordinary engineering challenge. The Shuangbao Grand Bridge was built to connect two mountain sides with a single long span, instead of forcing vehicles to continue winding through the valley below. To achieve this, engineers anchored both bridge abutments directly into the rock at either end of the gorge, allowing the entire structure to transfer its load into the mountains without the need for support piers rising from the canyon below. Thanks to this solution, a route that once twisted through dangerous terrain has been reduced to a crossing that takes only a few seconds. By the time your vehicle reaches the opposite side, the gap that once separated the two mountain ranges has already disappeared behind you in an instant. Xiaolangdi Dam. The Xiaolangdi Dam was built within the Yellow River Canyon, where steep terrain made transporting materials and carrying out large-scale construction a challenge that lasted for years. To control the river that carries the world's largest sediment load, engineers designed a system of spillways and water diversion tunnels deep inside the dam, capable of withstanding the immense pressure of massive water releases. This design allows the dam to perform something rarely seen, deliberately creating artificial floods that flush millions of tons of sediment out of the reservoir before it can reduce the dam's operating capacity. When every spillway gate opens at once, torrents of white water surge into the canyon, turning the entire dam into a giant machine cleaning itself. Magician grottos. Carved into a sandstone cliff more than 80 meters high, the Magician grottos were not built on the mountain, but cut directly into the rock itself. More than 1,600 years ago, artisans began excavating the first caves before linking them together with a network of wooden walkways clinging to the cliff face. The entire complex expanded across nearly vertical rock walls, where transporting materials and carrying out construction was an extraordinary challenge. Inside the caves, thousands of Buddhist statues and reliefs have survived through multiple dynasties, despite earthquakes, rain, and centuries of weathering. Today, the narrow walkways still hug the cliff just as they did when they were first built, leading visitors through a monument whose very landscape once made construction seem almost impossible. Mount Emi temples. Whenever the clouds begin to part, an entire complex of temples slowly emerges atop Mount Emi, where people built at an elevation of more than 3,000 meters. Every stone, timber, and construction material had to be carried up steep mountainsides through rugged terrain and constantly changing weather conditions. At the center of the summit stands the nearly 50-meter-tall gilded statue of Samantabhadra, serving as the focal point of the entire complex and a striking landmark rising above the sea of clouds. As clouds drift across the mountaintop, the statue and surrounding buildings fade in and out of view, blurring the boundary between architecture and the sky. Standing on the golden summit, the strongest impression is not that you are on a mountain, but inside a monument built where there seemed to be almost no place left for people to build. Bailong Elevator. Instead of carving thousands of stone steps or opening another mountain trail, engineers chose to attach an entire glass elevator system to the cliffs of Zhangjiajie. The Bailong Elevator rises more than 320 meters, anchored directly to towering sandstone pillars and carrying visitors from the valley floor to the summit in less than 2 minutes. To secure the structure on such extreme terrain, engineers combined a steel framework with deep rock anchors while designing the system to operate reliably through heavy rain, strong winds, and the harsh mountain environment. As the glass cabin climbs higher, the towering stone pillars and forests below gradually fall away. In the final seconds, the elevator clears the edge of the cliff, lifting passengers from the valley floor to the mountaintop in less than 2 minutes. Yaxi Expressway. Across just over 200 kilometers, the Yaxi Expressway climbs nearly 2,000 meters in elevation between the Sichuan Basin and the Liangshan Mountains. Instead of ascending the slopes directly, the highway stretches the climb through a succession of curves, viaducts, and tunnels that keep the grade within safe limits for traffic. To cross the gaps between mountain ranges, bridges span deep valleys while tunnels cut directly through massive rock formations, avoiding the most difficult terrain. Construction crews had to contend with landslides, dense fog, and the complex geology of Western China. From behind the wheel, the mountains remain as imposing as ever, but they are no longer obstacles. They have become part of the highway itself. Ruyi Bridge. The Ruyi Bridge captures attention at first sight because it looks unlike any conventional bridge. Set among the Tiantai Mountains, the structure curves through the sky like a flowing ribbon. Its 3 connected spans constantly change direction, creating the bridge's signature sweeping curves while allowing it to adapt to the terrain on both sides of the canyon. The entire structure is anchored into the mountainsides, allowing the main span to stretch across the gorge without a single support pier below. Several sections of the bridge feature glass walkways, revealing the valley hundreds of meters beneath your feet. With every turn, the view shifts again, transforming a simple crossing into a one-of-a-kind experience in the Tiantai Mountains. Shuefeng Mountain Subaoding Wind Farm. Along the Shuefeng Mountains, enormous wind turbines have created a new skyline, rising even higher than the forests covering the mountain ridges. Before the first blades could begin turning, engineers had to carve roads along the mountain sides to transport steel tower sections, turbine blades stretching dozens of meters, and equipment weighing hundreds of tons to elevations once occupied only by rock and forest. Every curve in the road was built for one purpose, allowing oversized transport vehicles to continue climbing. In return, the mountains provide powerful and remarkably consistent winds throughout most of the year, making Shuefeng one of China's most impressive mountain wind farms. As seas of clouds drift across the peaks, the turbines continue turning quietly above them, making the entire mountain range resemble a giant machine moving in harmony with nature. Fanjingshan Red Cloud Golden Summit. Fanjingshan is defined by a colossal rock formation split in two by nature millions of years ago, creating twin stone pillars that rise through the clouds. On the two opposing peaks, ancient builders constructed separate temples and linked them with a narrow stone bridge spanning the gap between the cliffs. To transport every stone slab and timber to an elevation of more than 2,300 meters, all materials had to be carried up thousands of mountain steps before being assembled within an extremely limited construction area. As clouds roll in, the entire mountain disappears beneath a white sea before slowly emerging again, seemingly suspended in the sky. Upon these two seemingly impossible rock pillars, people created a monument that has endured for centuries, defying both the unforgiving terrain and the relentless passage of time. Guozigu Bridge Road. The highway suddenly leaves the mountainside, sweeps into a giant curve, and crosses the valley on the Guozigu Bridge in the Tian Shan Mountains. To span deep valleys and steep slopes, engineers elevated the entire route with a series of viaducts and cable-stayed bridges. Twin bridge towers, rising hundreds of meters high, support the deck with dozens of steel cable bundles extending outward on both sides, creating a structure strong enough to carry a continuous flow of traffic. As a result, Guozhou is no longer the transportation bottleneck that once divided the region. It has become a vital gateway linking Xinjiang with the rest of China and Central Asia. Viewed from above, the bridge curves gracefully through layers of mountains, turning what was once a slow journey, winding through the valley, into a crossing completed in just a few minutes. Yanjin. Yanjin cannot expand to either side. Instead, the entire city is forced to stretch along the Nangxi River like a single continuous street. Its historic center is trapped between the river and towering cliffs, and at its narrowest point, the land available for the city is said to measure less than 30 meters across. With almost no room left to build outward, buildings have grown upward, while many structures stand on concrete columns placed directly beside the river. Roads, railways, bridges, and neighborhoods are compressed into one narrow corridor, allowing Yanjin to extend for kilometers while leaving almost no direction for further expansion. Here, every meter of land serves multiple purposes at once, and the city continues to grow only along the river because the surrounding cliffs have closed off every other path. Three Gorges Dam. Asia's longest river no longer flows freely as it passes through the mountains of Hubei. Here, the Three Gorges Dam stretches across the entire Yangtze River. The river is squeezed between the towering cliffs of the Three Gorges, forcing its entire flow through a natural bottleneck before continuing downstream. That unique landscape made this the ideal location for China's largest dam. Inside the dam are 34 hydroelectric generating units and a 5-stage shiplock system, producing electricity while allowing vessels to overcome the difference in water levels along the country's most important river. From that point on, the Yangtze no longer passes only through the three gorges. It also flows through a colossal engineering project built at the narrowest point of the entire gorge system. Hanging Temple, China. To find the Hanging Temple, you do not look toward the mountaintop. Instead, you search for the recessed section carved into the cliffs halfway up Mount Hengshan. More than 1,500 years ago, that natural hollow was chosen as the site for the entire temple. Rather than exposing the structure to rain, snow, and falling rocks, the builders used the overhanging cliff above as a natural shelter, while the halls, corridors, and wooden bridges were attached directly to the rock face behind them. Every construction material had to be carried dozens of meters up the cliff before being assembled on an extremely limited ledge. By the time you reach the end of the wooden walkway, what stays with you most is not the temple itself, but the cliff that determined every aspect of its design. Mount Hua temples. Mount Hua is home to a complex of temples scattered across isolated peaks, connected by stone steps, stairways, and narrow paths that cling to the cliffs. Over the centuries, building each temple roof in terrain with almost no level ground required stone, timber, and every other material to be carried along routes barely wide enough for one person. In some places, paths were carved directly into the rock face, while small bridges linked separate peaks, allowing the complex to continue expanding across elevations of thousands of meters. Fog, powerful winds, and sheer cliffs have made both construction and preservation a constant challenge. At Mount Hua, the full scale of the complex cannot be captured in a single frame. Only by continuing along the ridge lines do the temple roofs appear one after another. Laojian Mountain Temple, China. Laojian Mountain rises from a sea of clouds, with golden temple roofs resting on rocky peaks more than 2,200 meters above sea level. Rather than leveling the summit to create a construction site, the buildings were arranged across the natural rock formations, following the steep terrain of the entire mountain range. To complete the complex, every stone slab, timber beam, and construction material had to travel up stairways, winding along the mountainside, where steep slopes, dense fog, and severe weather constantly challenged transportation. Each winter, snow covers the entire summit. When the clouds rise, only the gilded temple roofs remain visible above them, seemingly suspended in the air. Over the centuries, Laojun Mountain was never reshaped to accommodate the architecture. Instead, the buildings follow each rocky ridge, creating a complex that seems to have belonged here for generations. Lingtong Temple. Hidden beneath the massive rock overhang on Mount Lingtong, Lingtong Temple appears to disappear into the cliff rather than stand apart from it. Instead of building on the summit or extending over the edge of the gorge, the builders used a natural rock hollow formed by millions of years of weathering and placed the entire temple inside it. Above, a massive stone formation shelters the roof. Below, a deep gorge opens beneath the structure, leaving barely enough space to connect the temple halls with narrow corridors along the mountainside. Bringing materials to this location meant climbing stone steps and pathways wide enough for only one person at a time. Today, the rock remains an inseparable part of the temple, revealing how ancient builders turned the landscape itself into a protective structure. Temple complex in Myeonshan. Most temples require a stretch of level ground. At Myeonshan, the entire complex was built against sheer cliffs. From shrines and palaces to corridors and wooden bridges, every structure clings to a different layer of rock, extending along the mountainside instead of occupying a single flat site. In some places, a natural rock overhang forms the ceiling of an entire hall. Elsewhere, suspended walkways cling to the cliff with a drop of hundreds of meters directly below. complete the complex, materials had to be transported across steep terrain and assembled on platforms barely large enough for each individual structure. The true scale of Mianshan only becomes visible as you continue along the cliff. One group of halls follows another, stretching across the entire mountainside. Shanxi River Ecological Highway. Instead of drilling through the mountainside, the Shanxi River Ecological Highway turns toward the water. Along the Shanxi River, in the Three Gorges region, the route extends for more than 4 kilometers on an elevated structure built close to the mountain, creating China's first highway constructed over water. A less expensive plan to tunnel through the mountain was originally proposed, but blasting the rock would have caused significant damage to the ecosystem and the riverside slopes. In the end, engineers chose to build hundreds of support columns in the water, preserving most of the natural landscape. As vehicles travel along the route, the Three Gorges Reservoir lies on one side, while the untouched mountain cliffs rise on the other. The highway now follows the edge of the water instead of cutting deep into the mountainside like a conventional mountain road. From bridges spanning deep gorges and roads clinging to cliffs to temples rising above seas of clouds, every structure began with a limit that once seemed impossible to overcome. Yet rather than reshaping nature, many of these projects were designed to adapt to the landscape itself. That approach has created structures unlike almost anything found elsewhere in the world. Of all the places you have just seen, which one impressed you the most? Share your answer in the comments. Do not forget to like and subscribe to join us on more journeys of discovery. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.